Also, as it pertains to elections, though, uh, Nancy Pelosi and House Democrat Socialists want to impose California state-style election rules nationwide. Legislation would require every state to register voters based on names in state and federal databases, such as anyone receiving food stamps or who interacts with a state DMV, mandates same day and online voter registration, expands mail and early voting, expands
Oh my gosh.
mail and early voting.
Year long voting now?
Start now.
Yeah,
Start
come on.
voting November
For
for your
2022.
midterm elections.
Yeah.
Yeah. Limit states' ability to remove voter rolls, to remove voters from the rolls, that is.
Why would you want that? I mean, you have to clean your voter rolls.
Why would you want that?
Oh yeah, you're right. To remove
Uh,
dead people.
Also, campaign finance provisions that would target the political speech of conservatives require some nonprofits to disclose publicly the names of donors who give more than $10,000, even if those groups aren't taking part in candidate elections. This is a way to, use uh, their allies in the purge to target the donor class for conservatives and Republicans as well.
Purging's not enough. Now you have to intimidate. Okay, this is good. Yeah.
And with respect to the administration of elections, I'm not even sure anymore if even if the election rules, the laws were changed or they were guarded in places like Pennsylvania, it would matter. And I point to this story of the final state race in Pennsylvania being decided, a state Senate race in Allegheny County. The at issue between the Democrat incumbent state senator and the Republican challenger were 300 absentee ballots in Allegheny County that voters neglected to date. If if the undated ballots were counted, the Democrat would win. If the undated ballots were not counted, the Republican would win. And the law is voters must date and sign the absentee ballot application in order for it to be counted. But that's not what a judge ruled, and a higher court declined to essentially take up the case. And so the Democrat incumbent wins because ballots were counted that run afoul of the black letter of the law. So reluctant are courts to overturn the stated election results, leaving that to local election authorities. So if local election authorities say it's okay to break the rules, to break the law, then it's okay to break the law and you're not going to have courts intercede. Well, then how can we even have a conversation if that's going to be the culture at the state level in places like Pennsylvania, important states, swing states? And then we'll see what happens at the federal level with the air support that Nancy Pelosi and Democrat socialists are trying to provide. Then is it even worth having a discussion about, well, at the state legislative level, that's where we need to make sure that you don't have administrative agencies or courts usurping the authority of the state legislatures. I guess state legislatures don't matter and state laws don't matter if they're Republican controlled or inspired. For more on all of this, we're pleased to be joined by Paul Kengor, who is a political science professor at Grove City College in Pennsylvania. Paul, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Amy, good to be back.
What about the states you call home and the substantive case there, forgetting all the different accusations about voter fraud, just the unwillingness to enforce the letter of the state election law in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, well, I'm about 55 miles north of Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh's in Allegheny County. That's the county you were talking about. I was born there and went to school there, University of Pittsburgh, and so this isn't a surprise. I've been watching this carefully, and yeah, you're right, Dan. So you got 300 votes, and it's a matter of whether or not they're dated or not. And it's, typically you would take this to the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court, which is 5 elected Democrats versus 2 elected Republicans. And it was the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court that blew everything up here to begin with. They're the ones who going outside of their constitutional authority in the state of Pennsylvania, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They changed election law, which to allow mail-in ballots, to change the dates and when the mail-in ballots were allowed to come in. They are not allowed to do that. That's the province of the state legislature. But they went ahead and did it anyway. And then after the election, when all of this was challenged in the state of Pennsylvania by people like Pennsylvania State Senator Doug Mastriano, Mike Kelly, who's actually my congressman from the Mercer County, Pennsylvania area, the state Supreme Court laughed at them and said, "You're late." And they cited this thing called latches, right?
Mm-hmm.
Latches, right? And so it's fascinating. And this applies to exactly what you just read to listeners. They intervene or intercede when it's to their benefit, and then they don't intervene or intercede when it's to their benefit. So in this case, they're, I guess, going to not intercede, and then that way these ballots without dates on them can be counted, and that way their guy can win. And liberals turn around and they accuse Republicans and Trump supporters and everybody else of being the political ones, right? But these 5 Democrats on the state Supreme Court, it's just a nightmare. And I don't know. I was on Mark Levin's show over the weekend, and Mark Levin asked me on the TV show. He said, "What can be done about this?" And I said, "I honestly don't know. I mean, what can a state legislature do to rein in kind of renegade activist judges? And I'm asking you this as well, Dan, because how can an activist judge just go and do something and then just kind of get away with it? It'd be like if the Chicago Bulls were playing, and all of a sudden, 3 guys just come on the court in the fourth quarter for the other team, and now it's 8-5, and a couple of the refs just kind of let them get away with it, right? And everybody in the audience is yelling and saying, "You're not allowed to do this," but they do it anyway, and then everyone's like, "Well, who can stop them?" And like, I don't know who can stop them, right? And so they do, and then they run up, another 20 points against the Bulls, and then the game's over. It's just a crazy, maddening thing, and this happened in Pennsylvania, and quite possibly in the other states as well. It's just it's so frustrating.
A interesting resignation letter or retirement letter, speaking of academia, since you're a member, from John Eastman, who was a law professor and dean at Chapman University's Fowler School of Law.
I saw that today.
Yeah. He, as you know, he committed the sin of being a counselor advisor to the President of the United States. That would be Trump. And he also
and it is a sin, Dan. It is a sin.
I understand, and he compounded that by articulating legal arguments like the one, and having legal conversations rooted in the law like the one we're having about Pennsylvania. And there was a move afoot among the professorate, mostly the undergrad professorate, to have him drummed out, and he basically says, it's not worth it for me. I'm retiring in the face of this sort of anti-intellectual mob mentality on campus.
Right. And the professor was a poli-sci professor, and Eastman points out in this really beautifully written letter that it wasn't law school professors who challenged him. It was these basically activist, liberal, poli-sci professors. And the letter, this is ironic you asked me about this. I was just reading this morning, and I immediately sent it to probably about a dozen different judges and law school types that I know around the country. And he not only does he talk about the persecution here, but with Pennsylvania. And I told people in my email, I said, read this letter simply if you want a good 2 or 3 paragraph summation on what happened constitutionally that people like Trump's lawyers and Ted Cruz are pointing out. And he writes here in Pennsylvania, the partisan elected judiciary in the conduct of Pennsylvania's election, they usurped the sole power of the legislature. The PA election results couldn't be certified. Well, I won't go through and I won't read it, but it's a lot of what he just said. And what's interesting about this, one of the people who emailed this to me this morning, in fact, a fellow academic, that's how I got it first. She said to me, she said, I really wish that Eastman here would stay and fight. But on the other hand, you can't blame the guy for just saying enough is enough. I don't want to be in this, to coin or to borrow from a liberal phrase that applies here. I don't want to be part of this hostile work environment, right, where I just get harassed all the time. And if you're going to turn your college over to leftists and let the leftists run the asylum, I'm going to go somewhere else. Why do I have to spend the last 5-10 years of my professional career in misery? And he points out here at the end of this article, where's he going? I think I'm currently on leave from Chapman while serving as the visiting professor of conservative thought at the Benson Center for the Study of Western Civilization at the University of Colorado, Boulder. And I think he says that, Dan, between that and a Claremont position, he's going there, right?
Right.
He says, I'm going to go there instead. And who could blame him? And so liberals are creating an environment where conservatives are going to go to exclusively conservative schools where they won't be harassed. And then liberals will have their exclusively liberal schools where liberals can have complete control of their kind of intellectual fiefdoms. And then, then they'll be all satisfied. They can, say that they're victorious after they've completely segregated the country into kind of, intellectual areas where just conservatives and just liberals. And then, of course, that won't be enough for the liberals. Then, like conservative churches, they'll have to go after these places.
That's right.
To try to shut them down, too. They won't be happy with what they've created.
Well, that's right. So that the problem is, some people like Eastman have the luxury of finding a soft landing spot. A lot of people don't. And as soon as you have that, to some extent, you have more of that stratification by ideology or political philosophy. You're far overwhelmed in these institutions by the left, starting in academia, and they will come for whatever you think is a safe haven. So going back to your overarching question, how do you address this when the courts decide they're not going to interpret the law? How do you address it when the legislature decides they're not going to make the law? How do you address it when the executive says he's not going to execute the law? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows, but I think we know where it goes.
Yeah, and in fact, Levin asked me that question on Sunday, and I said, if you're looking for a kind of practical solution, I would say one thing would be that the Republican National Committee should hold like a big seminar or conference, right? It may be the summer where they invite Pennsylvania or where they invite Republican legislators from all around the country and bring in legal people and have kind of brainstorming sessions. What can we do to kind of stop this kind of thing in the future? I mean, they're literally going to have to hold like seminars to figure out what do we do when something like this happens? How do you stop this? And on the Eastman thing, let me say this too, Dan, that this case involves the election, the November election, with Eastman representing Donald Trump and so forth. But this kind of hostile environment, I mean, this is already hitting hyperspeed in the academy on matters of race and LGBTQ. And I mean, that's where it's going to be really bad. I wrote a piece for American Spectator. It's posted there right now, January 6, 2021, the new Crystal Knot, right? The new Pearl Harbor, the new 9/11. And I quote this professor from University of Texas at Austin, and he's listed in this article in Inside Higher Ed as a, quote, scholar of democracy, unquote. And he says the event of the Capitol is another 9/11 attack on the U.S. government by terrorists. Now, that's an exact quote. Quote, the attackers are motivated by xenophobia, racism, and hate, unquote. And then that not being enough, Dan, right? He takes this from the attackers of the insurrection at the Capitol, it puts them aside, puts Donald Trump aside, and then goes after the entire GOP leadership. By the way, this would include Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell, presumably. Quote, today's terrorism is at the heart of the Republican Party, which now, in much of its leadership, has become a white supremacist Al-Qaeda. Unquote.
Yeah. That guy
a,
sounds like a speechwriter for the House and Senate Democrat Socialist caucuses.
Well, he has an endowed chair at the University of Texas at Austin, and he's calling the entire he's saying, quote, much of the Republican leadership, unquote, has become a white supremacist Al-Qaeda. So for people thinking, like some of the people emailing me now, kind of David French types and others, that after they've gotten Donald Trump run out of office, it's going to cool now, and at least they won't be calling Republicans white supremacists anymore. Oh, no. No. This has just begun. This is, and it's not just people who voted for Donald Trump. If you've got an R next to your name, right, and believe me, they're going after Ronald Reagan retroactively. They went after George H. I can give you quotes from Maxine Waters calling George H.W. Bush a racist, right? They went after George W. Bush. With Donald Trump, it was a little easier for them. But now they're going to go after any Republican, anyone in academia. The goal is to label and smear anyone who's a Republican or a conservative with this scarlet R. They are
I'm very much I'm very much looking forward to David French's commentary in the coming months and years now that he and other Never-Trumpers got what they wanted. Paul Kengor, professor of political science at Grove City College in Grove City, PA, contributor to the American Spectator, author of The Devil and Karl Marx, Communism's Long March of Death, Deception, and Infiltration. Paul, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
All right. You guys take care. God bless.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information.